What's going on, guys and girls? Static here, and welcome to my first tutorial back since my break. I'm really excited to show you this creation. Actually, it's my first creation with hoppers since I've been back. And this is really my first experience with hoppers since they came out after my break. This creation probably isn't going to be too useful if you're just a single player Minecrafter, but if you play on servers, this is definitely going to be something you'll find handy. So as you've probably guessed just from looking at it, this is a combination lock. So as you can see at the moment, my valuable chests up here are locked. You can't open them, which means none of the guys on the server here can steal my stuff. However, we've got this panel up in front of us here with a bunch of item frames on it. And you can see if we punch in a very specific combination, which here is cobblestone arrow bone, or arrow bone cobblestone, it unlocks the chests, and now we can access all my stuff and all those lovely diamonds. So this is actually quite a customizable lock. There's a lot of ways you can set this up, and you can have pretty much as many digits in the combination as you want. This particular design is not order sensitive, so you can press the buttons in any specific order you want. And at the moment I've got it set up in a way that's pretty easy to crack the combination. As you can see in the dispensers that aren't the actual combinations, we've just got gravel, and in the ones that are the actual digits, we've got the actual item. So yeah, very easy to crack this combination lock, but you can change the design up so that you do have the actual items in all the different hoppers, the dispensers, sorry, which will make the design a little bit harder to crack. So I'll have a really quick look at the redstone back behind here. Now, just to note, this redstone back here is all superfluous. I pretty much did that just to make it look a little bit more complex, so the guys on the server couldn't really figure out what's going on, and just because I was messing around with the design a little bit. But really, this is all you need. So as you can see, we've got the these are actually droppers, not dispensers, since they are a little bit cheaper to craft. And they just dispense into a water stream here, which carries items over the hoppers. And I don't want to jump into that water stream. Now, each of these hoppers is an item sorter, so unless like a bone or arrow or cobblestone float over these, the items are just going to keep going past and get picked up by this all catcher here. So as I mentioned before, most of these dispensers have gravel in them rather than an actual item. So most of the dispensers, or the droppers I should say, will be caught by this final hopper here, which deactivates the lock, so that even if the correct combination is put in afterwards, the lock won't work. So people can't just spam the other combinations and get the correct combination. So as you can see, very, very simple design. It's expandable as well. You could expand this line here out pretty much as far as you want to, and so you could have as many of these pins as you want to, and you can actually do a lot of other things as well to increase the security with this kind of design. So like you could make this order sensitive if you wanted to, using hoppers to block off the using pistons, sorry, to block off the different hoppers. So depending on how much effort you actually want to put into the design, you can increase or decrease the security. So yeah, very, very flexible design, very useful sort of creation, and it takes very, very few resources, as you can see. And so something that you can make pretty early on into the piece if you're playing on a server. Alright, so let's get to building. Alright guys, so as you can see, just to get us started off here, I've already set up our droppers and the buttons. So the buttons and the droppers are very, very easy to set up, so there's no redstone required whatsoever. Placing them like this, you can see that if we hit this button, that'll power the dispenser on the left, and if we hit this button, that'll power the dispenser on the right. So there's no issue with these buttons powering both dispensers or anything like that. And very, very nice that we can fit so many buttons and so many selectors into such a small area without any redstone. So now that that's set up, we're going to just set up our item filters. Now, one thing to note with this design is that if you use any of the combinations in a given column, you're going to need to place the hoppers or the item filters to detect that combination selection either in line with that column or preferably slightly after that column. So the reason being is that dispensers or droppers will shoot out items kind of randomly. So if we were to put a hopper underneath this column that's intended to detect items from this column, sometimes the item will spit out a little bit to the left and the combination click won't actually set off the pin. Because it uses pistons, though, you can hear when the pins activate. Although if you're not using sound, then it becomes really, really annoying, as you can't tell which buttons you've pushed and which ones you haven't yet. Like which ones have registered and which ones haven't. But so now that that slight concession's out of the way, we'll get to work on our item filters here. Alright, so as you can see, we've had a little bit of weather here in the creative world, which kind of ruins the continuity of the video. A little bit annoying, but we're going to continue on anyway. So after you've placed your droppers and buttons, the next stage is to place our item filters. So these are just going to be our stock standard item filter. So where this center block here is, we're going to want to place a hopper, and we want to draw some signal out of that using a comparator. So we're going to place the comparator first, just like so, and then we're going to place a hopper going directly into that comparator. Now I'm not 100% sure if this little spout here needs to be pointing into the comparator for this to work, but every tutorial I've seen on these item filters says that it does need that to happen, so we're just going to do that to be safe. And out of that comparator, you're going to want to draw a redstone line of 2 blocks in length, so one directly out and one block down, just like so. And out of this block, we're going to want to pull some power, so using a repeater, just like that, and that repeater is going to power this block, which has a redstone torch on it. So when that repeater gets power, this redstone torch is going to turn off. For the time being, that redstone torch is going to be blocking or locking this hopper, which is pointing into that chest there. So at the moment, this hopper won't take any items, but once that redstone torch turns off, that hopper will unlock and allow items to pass through. Now you're also going to want to get rid of that block on top of the chest so that you can access this chest later on. So this is where when items filter through your system, the items are going to be deposited, so that if your hoppers up or droppers, so if your droppers up the top get emptied, you can come down here, open this chest, and you'll have a bunch of whatever item this particular pin corresponds to, and then you can restock those droppers. Pretty simple. Now, even though this item filter design is tileable, and the bud switch design we're going to use in a minute is tileable as well, you can't actually place the bud switches next to each other, otherwise they're going to trigger each other, which is not what we want for the system. So each of your item filters here is going to need to be at least 1 block apart, which is not such a big issue, because like I've said, for each of these columns here, wherever the item comes out, the item filter that corresponds to that item is going to need to be at least in line with this column, or preferably at least 1 block further down the line. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're placing these item filters. Make sure they're at least 1 block apart. And so once you've got your circuit set up here, all you need to do is in this top hopper here, in these last 4 slots, you need to place 21 of any item that you're not going to be filtering through the system. So for this one, we're just going to use redstone torches, but you can use pretty much anything. So very simple, just grab a stack of 21 of the item, drag it across, spreading it equally across those 4 slots, and then just place the last one in that slot there. I'm pretty sure you can place that anywhere, but I just like to place it in that first slot there just for consistency. And in this very first slot of the hopper, you want to place whatever item you're sorting. Now it is very important that the item that you're sorting, so the item that's going to set off this pin, is in that first block there, otherwise this circuit isn't going to work. So for this one, you can see in this first dropper down the bottom we've got grass blocks, so we're going to be filtering the grass block through this pin here. And so I've just gone ahead and set up the rest of those item filters. So you can see that we're just using these bottom 3, sorry, not that one, so we're using the bones, the grass blocks, and the rotten flesh, and so you can see those correspond to these first 3 pins there, and then every other dispenser or dropper we've filled with gravel, which is going to activate this last pin, which we're going to be using as our intruder detection. So the way this works, in case you haven't seen this kind of item filter before, is that as you can see at the moment, all of these comparators are outputting a redstone signal of 1, so it's only lighting up this first piece of redstone dust there. However, if we throw in a grass block into this top hopper, don't know if you can see that, but very, very quickly, that last piece of redstone dust fired there. We might actually just use a piston so that you can see that a little bit easier. So we're going to just do that. So you can see that triggers the piston just like so. And so we want to try and turn this output into some sort of a kind of like an RS NOR latch kind of signal. So we want it to trigger and stay set. Now, unfortunately, what can we use? We'll use not a redstone block. We want to use some sort of a building block. So unfortunately, the signal that this outputs is longer than a 1-tick pulse. So as you can see, we can't just turn this into a T flip-flop. We're going to need to use some sort of other design to make use of this signal. Now, like I've said, these item filter designs can be tiled, so you could place another item filter right here and they wouldn't interfere, even though the redstone lines would connect. Reason being is that because this only outputs a redstone signal of 2, when that outputs a signal of 2, that's only going to power the redstone dust here and the redstone dust over there, like if we were to place another item filter in this gap, but it won't, however, power the redstone dust that would be here. So it would only trigger, oops, didn't mean to destroy that, but it would only trigger the piston that it was connected to. However, because we're going to use bud switches to turn this signal into some sort of a usable output, if we place them next to each other, this piston triggering will then trigger the piston next to it, so you get 2 pins firing at once, which is not what we want, and that's why we've had to include this gap in between the pins here. Alright, so once we've got this, the next thing we want to do is use some sort of a water stream to drag the items across the top of the hoppers so that the pins downstream can get triggered. So very, very, very simple to do. So we're just going to fill in the blocks between each of these hoppers, and pretty much the most important blocks here are going to be the blocks in front of these dispensers or droppers, and so that's going to mean that when these items get spit out, it's going to hit the glass wall, fall down into the item stream and get carried along that way. And so of course we're going to want to carry that around to the sides to contain our water stream, and just carry that along like so. Don't need that there. Just like that. And optionally at the end here, what I like to do is just place a cactus. And so what that's going to do is, if any of the items get dispensed and don't get picked up by these dispensers, the cactus is going to destroy them so that they don't start lagging your world. You could optionally place a hopper at the end here as well, just as a catch-all, so that you don't destroy any of your items. But ideally, you want to use items in the dispensers that you have a lot of anyway, just so that the dispensers can be used multiple times. So chances are you're not going to worry too much if those items get destroyed. So once you've got this sort of setup going here, you can just place your water stream on top of that first hopper, and you can see that's going to drag items across the top of the hoppers and allow each of those pins to get triggered. Now, because as you can see, I am actually in an ice or snowy biome, I'm also just going to place a block on top of that water stream so that it doesn't freeze over, but in the final design you don't necessarily need to do that. Alright, so like I've said, now that we've got this, we're going to need to somehow draw an output out of these blocks, and to do that we could use an RS NOR latch, but instead we're going to get a little bit fancy and use a bud switch. So we're going to use a variant of this bud switch here. As you can see, it's extremely simple. The important parts of this bud switch are this block, which gets powered, which needs to be separated by 1 block from the piston. And that's pretty much it. So as you can see, by causing a block update next to that piston, it's going to make the piston realize that it's powered by that block. It's going to update, causing the piston to extend, pushing the glass block to where this sand block would be, meaning that it's no longer powered, and that means that the piston's then going to retract. Now, like I said, we're going to use a variant of this bud switch. It's going to be changed a little bit because we want to chain these between the different pins so that our reset pin on the end here can affect the other 3 pins in the line. And also we want these bud switches to act so that when they get triggered, instead of straight away retracting, we want them to stay in the set position until we hit a reset line or until that intruder alarm gets hit. So yeah, we're going to alter this just a little bit. So we're going to place all of these just up against the end of the pins there. Now for our reset line, I prefer to use gravel instead of sand just to differentiate it from the other pins. There's no real practical reason for doing this aside from to differentiate the pins. So if you just wanted to use sand or whatever you've got, or gravel for all of the pins, just in case your sand is in short supply, feel free to do that. But for this design, we're just going to use sand for the first 3 pins and gravel for the last one. And so the way that this is going to work is that this first gravel pin here is going to supply the redstone power for all of these 3 bud switches that precede it, so that when this one gets activated, it's going to reset all of the bud switches, including the first one. But when these ones get set, because the power is going to be constant and not dependent on these pins, they're going to stay triggered. So very simply, what we're going to do is drag this redstone line across like so. So as you can see, these pistons are now diagonally powered instead of being powered from the block above. And so we're going to drag that redstone line just across the top like so. And of course, we're going to need another piece of redstone dust like so. We're going to have a repeater pointing into that block there. And that repeater is going to get its power from that block there, which is going to get its power from that redstone torch. So as you can see, that causes this line to be active, and this redstone torch here is going to be our manual reset. So we're just going to put a button there, or if you have a reset, like in my design, I've got the pressure plates for the exit of the room hooked up to this. That way that's going to manually reset the whole thing. And so at this stage our combination lock is pretty much working. So you can see that if we throw a grass block into here, just so that it hits that first hopper, triggers the first pin, we can throw our other 2 lock items like so, and those trigger the consecutive pins after that. And if we throw in a gravel block, you'll see it'll hit the reset line at the very end, floats over the other hoppers without triggering them, and then triggers that last one, which you see retracts all of the pins. So now all that's left to do is to use these pins here to draw out our signal, and we're going to turn these into some sort of an AND gate. Alright, so this part of the design is the part of the lock that I overcomplicated in the lock that you saw at the start of the video. So to convert these pins extending into a redstone current is actually pretty simple. So what we want to do, we want to pass a redstone current through these pins when they extend. So we're going to send a redstone current at that air block that's above them at the moment using a repeater, which when the columns extend is going to pass the redstone current through the column, allowing it to connect to our piston in a moment. So we're just going to do that like so, using a torch for a constant on signal. Now when those get powered, that's going to send power to a piece of redstone dust on the other side of that column here like so. And those, when they get powered, are going to, and we're actually going to need that there like so, they're going to turn off each of these torches. This is where our AND gate comes into the design. So we're going to then have a redstone line underneath these torches just like so. And so these torches, because they're currently on, are going to be powering this redstone line, as you can see. If we can do that without falling, just like so. And we're going to just put a block here like that. And what do we want? We want to go up like that. Place a sticky piston on the bottom block just like that. Connect the redstone line into it, and there you go. So that's got the chests locked. So in the final design, you probably wouldn't have your valuables chest right next to the circuitry like I have here. You'd probably have that out to the side like I showed you in the design at the start of the video. But for now, this will do. You could pretty much just carry this redstone line out wherever you wanted it. Because the signal is always on, it's going to be powering whatever pistons you use to lock the chest. And as you can see, we now can't open that chest. But if we get our items that we need to unlock the chest, which was a bone, we need rotten flesh, and we need a grass block, just like so. So if we throw those into the system, you can see we trigger one pin, next pin, and then when the third pin triggers, you see all of those redstone torches are turned off, which means this redstone line turns off, which unlocks our chest here. So yeah, pretty simple. And so then, like I said, you'd probably have the reset line here hooked up to your pressure plates for exiting the storage room, and once that triggers, you can see the whole system locks again. And that's pretty much the lock in working order. Now, the only problem with the lock at the moment is that we don't actually have the intruder alarm working. So you'll see if we enter the correct combination, the lock unlocks, and when we put in a gravel block, which is our reset block or our what we want to be our intruder alarm block, it does trigger the system. However, what we want is when people push the incorrect combination, we want the whole lock to lock so that they don't actually know what the combination is. But as you can see, if we just input a gravel block, instead of this one extending and being locked like we want it, it just pulses. So at the moment, it's just a reset pin. But if we want that to be an intruder alert pin, we can do that pretty simply. All we need to do is swap this repeater out for a piece of redstone dust, which means that this block is always going to be diagonally powering that piston, meaning it is a constant bud switch. So you can see if we now throw a piece of gravel in there, that should extend and stay extended. But as you can see, the rest of these pistons here are no longer bud switches because we're not getting power through this line. So to change that, all we need to do is add an extra couple of blocks, just like so, place a repeater facing out, and then curve that redstone line around. So you can see if we retract that piston, now that line is powered, meaning that all of those pistons below there are going to be bud switches. And so when that gravel piston extends, which we'll just throw it there for now. So you see it extends, disables all the other bud switches, so no matter how many times we throw zombie flesh, bones, or grass into those hoppers there, they're not going to trigger the system, so I might actually throw a grass block there, so just so you can see that. So you can see it does trigger, but then it quickly retracts. And that triggers because this block here powers the piston momentarily, but that won't allow for the system to be, that won't count as a valid input of a code. And so resetting this is still pretty much the same, so you can just push that button there, and because that turns off that redstone signal, that'll reset this bud and turns off the signal on this line, so it resets all these other 3 buds here. Alright, and so that's the hopper combination lock done, guys. So if you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like or a favourite, as those do help my channel out a fair bit. If you really enjoyed the content and you want to see more like this, feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It is free after all. And like I've said, this is quite a customizable design. So if you come up with your own version of this design with some different features in it, so maybe if you make it order sensitive or something like that, feel free to leave me a video response. So whether you want to send that to me in a message or on my Facebook page or Twitter page, feel free to do that. And the most inventive design that I get sent, I'll probably feature in a future video. So yeah, do send those designs through, guys. So yeah, like I said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. My name's Static, and I will see you guys next time.